January 1943. A frigid winter night grips the dense Ardennes forest. Snow muffles every sound, yet distant artillery thunders, shaking the ground beneath frozen boots. A squad of American infantry moves cautiously through shadowed trees, rifles ready, breath forming icy clouds in the black air. The moon is hidden behind thick clouds, leaving the soldiers blind to the lurking enemy. Suddenly, a faint glint catches the eye of one man, a reflection barely noticeable from a distant German patrol. They freeze, hearts hammering. One misstep, one careless movement, and death could come from anywhere. Patrols fumble with torches and flares, exposing themselves to counterfire. Darkness dominates the battlefield. Somewhere in a factory thousands of miles away, engineers at Sperry Corporation study instruments designed for aircraft, unaware that their next project could give soldiers the impossible gift: sight in the night. A new technology, untested and fragile, promises to transform warfare. The quiet tension of the forest and the frantic improvisation of soldiers on edge will soon meet innovation. The cold, black night whispers a silent question. How do you fight what you cannot see? Transition. This need for vision in the darkness would drive Sperry engineers to a breakthrough that changed nocturnal warfare forever. By 1943, World War II had engulfed continents, and the night had become as deadly as the day. Across Europe, the Allies and Axis fought not only over territory, but over the unseen. Darkness was no longer a reprieve, it was a battlefield in itself. Soldiers navigating forests, ruined towns, and narrow roads faced enemies who vanished into shadows, while artillery shells lit the sky like fleeting fireworks. American troops, despite rigorous training, were at a technological disadvantage. Unlike the Germans, who had begun experimenting with infrared detectors, and the British, who had developed early night-fighting radar for aircraft, the U.S. Army relied largely on flares, moonlight, and the nerves of its men. Patrols creeping through snow-covered fields or across bombed-out towns moved cautiously, each step calculated to avoid detection. Riflemen strained to identify silhouettes. Sentries froze in place, trying to discern friend from foe. Many units suffered losses not from superior enemy firepower, but from the inability to see in the dark. In North Africa, the problem was reversed but equally deadly. Desert nights brought sudden, invisible attacks that left units disoriented and exposed. Across the Pacific, island jungles swallowed patrols whole, forcing commanders to rethink tactics and schedules, often delaying operations until daylight, which allowed the enemy to regroup. The strategic problem was clear. The Allies could not fully leverage their manpower and firepower if darkness neutralized their advantage. In this environment, private industries and military research labs began exploring solutions. Among them, the Sperry Corporation stood out. Known for precision instruments in aviation, gyroscopes, flight stabilizers, and optical devices, Sperry had built a reputation for innovation under pressure. Engineers at their New York facilities understood the challenge. If men could not see at night, they could not fight effectively. By late 1942, Sperry had begun conceptual experiments with infrared light, a spectrum invisible to the naked eye but detectable with sensors. These experiments were painstaking. Early prototypes were bulky, fragile, and unreliable, yet the engineers pressed on, driven by both patriotic urgency and industrial pride. Trials began in controlled environments. Infantry units were brought to testing grounds, where artificial darkness masked dummies and obstacles. Initial attempts revealed numerous limitations. Batteries drained quickly, optics fogged, and scopes were heavy, straining already exhausted soldiers. Still, every minor success hinted at the revolutionary potential of night vision. Engineers refined lenses, experimented with power supplies, and even studied enemy infrared research captured from raids. Reports filtered back to military planners in Washington, emphasizing the strategic promise of this technology. The message was clear: a tool that could allow soldiers to see in the dark might tilt the balance of nocturnal engagements in favor of the Allies. As prototypes advanced, logistical challenges emerged. Production lines were not configured for optical devices of such precision. Supplies of lenses, infrared-sensitive materials, and electrical components were limited. The War Department had to negotiate allocations, prioritize experimental units, and coordinate field trials without disrupting ongoing operations. Meanwhile, field commanders faced a constant dilemma. The night was both an ally and a threat. For reconnaissance missions, ambushes, and perimeter defense, darkness was essential. But without reliable visibility, the very same night became a liability. The first field tests of Sperry infrared scopes in late 1943 demonstrated the potential and limitations of the technology. Soldiers equipped with early devices could detect movement at distances previously impossible, often spotting enemy patrols before they were seen. Yet equipment failures, harsh weather, and operator inexperience tempered enthusiasm. These trials underscore the urgency of refining the technology. To give American forces the ability to fight confidently under the cover of darkness was not merely an advantage. It was becoming a necessity. Across battlefields from Europe to the Pacific, the silent struggle against the night continued. Soldiers relied on instinct, training, and luck. Engineers at Sperry worked tirelessly, knowing that every improvement in scope design, battery life, and sensor sensitivity could mean life or death for men in the field. The world was at war, and one of the least visible fronts, the battle against darkness, was about to be transformed forever. Transition. The human, technological, and tactical stakes set the stage for the next phase, exploring the multiple angles of how infrared technology would touch soldiers, commanders, and enemies alike. The fight against darkness was not just a matter of technology. It touched every aspect of war. Human endurance, tactical decisions, leadership dilemmas, and the psychological strain of confronting an unseen enemy. Each angle reveals how Sperry's infrared scopes would ripple across the battlefield. Soldiers on night patrols experienced a world transformed by shadows. Without night vision, every rustle of leaves or crack of a branch sparked immediate tension. Men huddled in foxholes, straining to detect movement, nerves frayed from endless vigilance. Early field tests with infrared scopes were met with awe and cautious optimism. Soldiers could suddenly detect silhouettes beyond the range of ordinary vision. Patrols moved more confidently, able to spot enemy positions without exposing themselves to fire. For many, it was like gaining a sixth sense. Yet, the technology was cumbersome. Early prototypes were heavy, prone to fogging, and often misaligned, forcing operators to train rigorously under controlled darkness. Even so, the human impact was profound. Fear of the unknown receded, replaced with a new, cautious confidence that night need no longer equal vulnerability. Sperry engineers had to overcome enormous technical hurdles. Infrared light, invisible to the naked eye, required sensitive detectors and lenses that could focus the spectrum accurately. Early models were fragile, with delicate electronics susceptible to cold and moisture. Engineers experimented with vacuum tubes, selenium cells, and later lead sulfide sensors to detect infrared radiation. The scopes demanded power, necessitating portable battery packs that were often heavy and drained quickly in the field. Each incremental improvement, a lens adjustment, a stronger battery, a lighter mount, was a small victory, gradually transforming a theoretical device into a viable battlefield instrument. By late 1943, the technology had advanced enough to offer meaningful tactical advantages, but reliability remained a constant challenge. Night operations had always favored the defender, exploiting darkness to ambush, evade, or reposition unseen. Infrared scopes reversed this dynamic. Patrols could infiltrate enemy lines, detect traps, and observe troop movements without reliance on flares or torchlight. Reconnaissance units became more effective, able to map positions and report intelligence with unprecedented accuracy. Commanders began envisioning night raids and perimeter security operations that leveraged infrared visibility. However, these tactics demanded training, coordination, and trust in improving technology. A misaligned scope could expose a soldier to enemy fire or cause false alarms. Yet when functioning correctly, the scope's extended situational awareness far beyond human capability, offering a new edge in nocturnal warfare. Commanders faced decisions that were both strategic and bureaucratic. Integrating a new, fragile technology into combat units required careful planning. Leaders had to allocate scarce devices to critical missions, ensure soldiers were trained under realistic conditions, and weigh the risk of failure against potential gains. Some generals embraced the promise of infrared scopes, ordering specialized night units equipped with the devices. Others remained skeptical, concerned about dependency on an untested technology. These leadership choices determined how quickly the innovation could influence battlefield outcomes. Decisions made in headquarters affected men on the ground, bridging the gap between industrial ingenuity and combat reality. The Axis powers, particularly Germany, had already experimented with infrared and other night fighting technologies. American adoption of Sperry scopes forced a subtle recalibration of enemy tactics. Patrols became more cautious, ambushes less frequent, and defensive positions reconsidered. Soldiers encountering Americans wielding night vision were often startled, unable to comprehend how unseen attackers could detect their presence. The mere knowledge that the Allies were developing infrared technology introduced uncertainty and hesitation, a psychological shift that complemented the tangible tactical advantage. Combat in darkness has always carried a moral dimension. The inability to see the enemy intensified fear, confusion, and hesitation. Infrared scopes altered this moral landscape, giving soldiers an almost unnatural awareness of their surroundings. It raised questions. Did technology reduce the human element of combat? Did it make killing easier or merely safer? While these questions were never fully answered during the war, the psychological impact was undeniable. Soldiers reported less stress during night operations, yet an unfamiliar detachment emerged as the battlefield became illuminated not by sunlight or flares, but by invisible beams and sensors. Each of these angles, human, technological, tactical, leadership, enemy, and psychological, intertwined to shape the introduction of night vision on the battlefield. They set the stage for a decisive transformation, a turning point in 1943 when the invisible war of the night would meet an invention capable of changing its course. These combined pressures, innovations, and human experiences culminated in the first combat deployment of Sperry infrared scopes, a moment when theory met the brutal reality of war, forever altering nocturnal engagements. The decisive moment arrived in late 1943, as American forces prepared for night operations in the dense, frost-bitten forests of Italy and the winding roads of northern France. The war had entered a phase where darkness could no longer protect anyone. Commanders, wary of repeated night ambushes and reconnaissance failures, finally authorized the deployment of Sperry infrared scopes in active combat. Soldiers were issued the bulky, awkward devices along with specialized training to interpret the faint, glowing outlines they projected. For many, this was their first glimpse of a battlefield redefined by unseen light. In December, a patrol of the U.S. 36th Infantry Division moved through a moonless Italian valley. The men crept past ruined farmhouses and shattered hedgerows, rifles raised, senses taut. For hours, every rustle could have been a trap. Then, using the infrared scope, one soldier detected a faint glow near a cluster of trees, an enemy sentry, invisible to the naked eye, silhouetted in infrared. A whisper to the squad leader, a swift maneuver around the position, and a potential ambush was averted without a single shot fired. Moments like this marked the first tangible proof that the technology could save lives. Elsewhere, small units tested infiltration tactics under the cloak of night. Recon patrols moved along enemy supply lines, marking positions of artillery and machine gun nests. Engineers had rigged scopes to cover a wider field of view, allowing teams to spot multiple targets at once. Soldiers reported an eerie sensation. They could see enemies who could not see them. The battlefield shifted from one of mutual uncertainty to one of asymmetric advantage. The stakes rose during a critical operation in northern France. A nighttime assault aimed to disrupt German reinforcements moving along a narrow road network. Units equipped with infrared scopes advanced silently. In one valley, American troops observed a German convoy forming, headlights obscured by clouds and terrain. Using the scopes, they called in artillery strikes and ambushed smaller patrols, neutralizing positions before the enemy realized they were compromised. The result was a tactical success with minimal casualties, proof that night vision could transform strategy, turning darkness from a liability into a force multiplier. At the same time, limitations were apparent. Cold and humidity often fogged lenses. Batteries drained faster than anticipated, and inexperienced operators sometimes misread readings, mistaking swaying trees for soldiers. Enemy countermeasures emerged too. Sporadic use of infrared signaling devices and increased patrol vigilance. Still, the overall impact was undeniable. The ability to detect threats before they could act shifted not just individual engagements, but the doctrine of night operations. Across European and Pacific theaters, field commanders began reconsidering every nocturnal mission. Patrols, reconnaissance, and ambushes that once relied solely on stealth now leveraged infrared vision as an indispensable tool. Engineers and soldiers collaborated closely, refining usage in real time. Reports from field units transmitted back to Washington and Sperry headquarters highlighted both successes and challenges, accelerating iterative improvements. Night no longer represented a veil of uncertainty. It became a calculated extension of strategy. By the close of 1943, Sperry infrared scopes had proven their worth. They were neither flawless nor omnipresent, but their deployment marked a turning point. Darkness was no longer absolute. Soldiers could navigate unseen terrain, detect enemy positions, and execute missions with newfound confidence. The battlefield had changed, subtly, invisibly, but irrevocably. These first deployments not only saved lives and achieved objectives, but also laid the groundwork for the broader strategic and psychological impacts that would unfold in the aftermath of infrared technology's introduction. The introduction of Sperry infrared scopes in late 1943 reshaped the night battlefield in ways that were immediate, measurable, and profound. Reports from infantry units detailed reductions in ambush casualties and increased mission success rates. In the Italian campaigns, patrols equipped with infrared scopes successfully navigated minefields, detected hidden machine gun nests, and avoided surprise attacks that had previously inflicted heavy losses. Soldiers described an almost surreal experience. The ability to see silhouettes moving in the darkness, to distinguish friend from foe, and to maneuver with a confidence previously impossible under night's oppressive cloak. Field evaluations emphasized the scope's tactical advantages. Reconnaissance units could map enemy positions without alerting them, enabling precision strikes and coordinated maneuvers. Small unit raids became more effective, with teams infiltrating defensive perimeters silently and reporting back with exact coordinates. Commanders began integrating night vision into operational planning, scheduling assaults and reconnaissance missions to exploit darkness rather than fear it. The War Department, observing the growing success of these early deployments, authorized scale production and wider distribution. Factories ramped up output, refining the delicate optics and sensors to meet combat standards, while training programs expanded to ensure soldiers could operate the technology under harsh conditions. Yet the aftermath was not solely technical. Psychological impacts were equally significant. Soldiers reported heightened morale, knowing they could detect threats before being surprised. Conversely, enemy troops grew wary, their confidence in nocturnal maneuvers shaken. Intercepted German communications indicated growing concern about the Americans' newfound night fighting capabilities. Infrared scopes introduced an invisible edge, shifting the balance of fear and initiative. Commanders on both sides had to recalibrate strategy. The night was no longer in neutral ground. It was contested territory illuminated in secret. Strategically, the long-term implications were far-reaching. Night operations became increasingly sophisticated, influencing campaigns from the Italian mountains to the forests of northern France and even Pacific Island engagements. The lessons learned during these early deployments informed not only the design of improved infrared devices, but also broader doctrine on night combat, reconnaissance, and tactical surprise. Officers documented these experiences meticulously, producing after-action reports that would guide future military development and eventually pave the way for post-war innovations in night vision technology. By the spring of 1944, Sperry infrared scopes had moved beyond experimental units. They were becoming an accepted element of American night operations, transforming small unit tactics, strategic planning, and the psychology of soldiers on both sides. The battlefield of the night had been irrevocably altered, and while limitations remained, weight, battery life, and environmental vulnerabilities, the technology had proven its worth. Men could now operate in darkness with a degree of clarity previously reserved for daylight, fundamentally changing the rhythm of warfare. With these immediate and long-term consequences established, the story moves toward reflection, an assessment of what this technological breakthrough meant for soldiers, commanders, and the course of modern warfare. The invention of Sperry infrared scopes in 1943 was more than a technological breakthrough. It was a profound shift in how humanity perceived the battlefield. Darkness, once an equalizer, became a domain where vision could be extended beyond natural limits. Soldiers who had once stumbled through forests and fields now moved with a cautious confidence, relying on devices that translated invisible infrared light into actionable information. The human cost of uncertainty diminished, and with it, a new dimension of control emerged. Yet the story of night vision is not solely one of triumph. It underscores the tension between human ingenuity and the enduring chaos of war. Soldiers learned to navigate shadows. Engineers pushed the boundaries of optical science, and commanders adjusted strategy to leverage this advantage. At the same time, the enemy adapted, morale fluctuated, and the ethical dimension of seeing and acting, while unseen, introduced complex moral considerations. Night vision altered perception, amplified initiative, and challenged traditional notions of fairness and courage on the battlefield. Ultimately, the legacy of the 1943 infrared scopes extends far beyond World War II. They paved the way for modern night vision technologies that today inform not only military operations, but also search and rescue, law enforcement, and scientific exploration. The interplay of necessity, ingenuity, and human endurance that drove Sperry's innovation remains a testament to how technology can transform survival, strategy, and understanding. In the cold, silent forests of 1943, men once blinded by night now glimpsed the outlines of their enemies, their own positions, and a future where darkness no longer dictated the terms of combat. The invisible light of infrared did more than illuminate the battlefield. It revealed the limitless potential of human invention when survival and necessity converge. A winter night, soldiers pausing in the snow, infrared scopes glowing faintly in their hands. The forest is still, yet alive with hidden movement. Darkness remains, but it no longer commands fear.